Hi there, welcome back to the channel. In this video I wanted to talk about a topic that's very close to my heart. It's the topic of arranging. For the purposes of this video, I'm taking arranging to mean the art of taking a musical idea and then fleshing it out with an expressive intention behind it. It refers to both larger scale elements like the structure of the piece, but also right down to the kind of nitty-gritty, if you like, of writing the actual parts and giving the musicians an interesting part to play in the whole. So the way that I'll be exploring this topic is through 5 tips. These are quite general, high-level concepts, so I think regardless of the genre that you're working in, hopefully there'll be something useful for you here. I work professionally as a composer, that's my day job. I've been doing that for about 10 years or so. These are things that have just really helped me personally. So without any further ado, let's get into each of the tips. So the first tip is, know what your arrangement is about. So this is all about intention, and the way I wanted to kind of gloss this one is actually to read you an excerpt from this book, which is a fantastic book on arranging by a sort of old school arranger from the big band era, but he also worked in film and TV, a guy called Sammy Nestico, and as well as sort of typical arranging advice about how to write for harp and things like that, he gives quite a lot of like good, wholesome, general sort of tips about arranging and what it's for and the mindset behind it. Right in the beginning of the book, he says, "Who am I writing for, and what kind of treatment does the music suggest? The answers to these questions give me direction. I know immediately the kind of harmony that I'll use and the general style that is implied." The first step is to familiarise yourself with the song, getting the feel of the tune, lyrics if applicable, and all its elements. And then in italics, he says, "Find a viewpoint before undertaking the task." So I've got a track here which was recorded very kindly by my friend Lucy.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
So pretty well-known tune. Let's see what I've done with the arrangement.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you.
So arguably here's an example where in the fight between what's going to serve the brief and the musical ego of the composer / arranger, the ego side has won. It just seems to be kind of needlessly complex and quite aggressive, and I don't know, to me not many things relating to the concept of having a happy birthday, so let's leave it at that. Tip 2 is don't clutter the melody. So here's an example. I've got sort of a good version and a bad version, so I'll start with the bad version, why not?
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you.
Yeah.
So yeah, you might have noticed that there was that quite distracting ad-lib element that was really just masking the melody a lot of the time. And I think in terms of what that ad-lib part was bringing to the arrangement, I quite liked it because it added that element of spontaneity and kind of just a bit more vibe. But I think there's another way that you could maybe approach the same idea, the same concept, but just make it slightly more fit with the bigger picture. So let's have a listen to this alternate version. Still not great because I'm not much of a singer, but anyway, bear with me.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, baby.
Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, yeah.
So just kind of playing around with the holes in the melody a little bit more. Again, I think there's a slight sense of sacrifice here on the part of the arranger or the composer. It's a mistake that I continually make, is I overwrite music, you know, and I just want to put all of those little kind of tasty moments in and little complicated harmonies and things like that. And very often feedback will come back saying, you know, basically just strip stuff out, simplify. It's kind of relative. There may be moments where you want to have a lot of counterpoint, you know, lots of lines kind of intertwining, and that can be exciting, you know, especially in perhaps perhaps a building up of tension kind of context. But as a sort of general rule, especially in a vocal piece, you want to just not crowd things too much. So tip number 3 is take care of each individual part or group of parts. I've fallen into this kind of pitfall many times where I've kind of written a piece of music, sort of done the arrangement, gotten to a certain point where I think it sounds kind of full enough. There's, all the harmonies being stated by the different instruments. There's a groove. It's got an intelligible structure to it, etc. And then the temptation is just to kind of say, okay, it's done. Especially if you're on a tight deadline, especially if there's a part of you that sort of knows that it's not done, but you're kind of slightly avoiding it and you don't want to quite confront all of the sort of little things that might be niggling you at some level in your consciousness, particularly in big, busy orchestral arrangements where you have lots and lots of tracks. Usually in those situations, I like to solo each instrumental group, so like brass, woodwinds, strings, and just listen to only those instruments, trying to think whether there's bits that seem like they're missing, bits that aren't quite happening as I originally conceived them. That's a really good way to just level up my whole arrangement very quickly. So I've got 2 versions again of the same piece of music. The first one, I think it sounds pretty good. It's all there. Let's just have a listen first of all.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you.
So what I like about this is it has a very distinctive identity. It's clearly a kind of jazz bossa nova type setting. It makes sense. But I would say overall it has a kind of slightly mediocre feel to it. And just think that it could be better. So let's hear what it sounds like applying this tip of taking care of each individual part.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you.
So a couple of things strike me immediately. First of all, it's got a bit more dynamic range. It has a bit more of a build at the end. Each individual part, there's just like little fills and things in there. There's little kind of details to the performance that, you kind of get a feeling of the cumulative effect of all of that, even if you're not hearing every micro detail. Things are also panned a bit. So there's kind of intentionality. It's creating the sense of musicians in a space. The vocal, I've added a bit of reverb and compression, nothing crazy. The conga part, all I've done is I've made an addition to this kind of conga loop, which I've just grabbed in the first version, which is literally just an Apple loop that I've copy pasted. And then it kind of stops with no kind of tail off or anything like that. I've just taken a sample instrument of a conga from Cineperk and sort of added in some little details and kind of made stops in the part as well to accommodate other aspects of the arrangement. So just in context.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you.
Similarly with the bass part, it's more or less the same. Let's just have a listen to the first bass part. So it's just got that kind of typical playing on the downbeats with a few little in-between notes. Let's have a listen to this version. So first of all, we've got some little slaps in there. We've got a bit more just general energy and kind of interest in the rhythm, although fundamentally it's doing something very similar to the first version. In the second half, we've almost got a bit more of a sense of development. It leaves the original idea and kind of starts to just play long notes, sustained notes.
Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you.
And then it joins in with the riff at the end. With the drums, it's very simple. The original drum part doesn't change very much. It's just this. Basically for the entire piece. Here I've just embellished it a bit with some kicks. I've added the odd fill. And then later on in the piece, a bit like the bass, I've kind of created a bit of a sense of development. The keys, I haven't touched the part at all. I was quite happy with the keys, but I did pan it slightly, and I also gave it a bit of reverb. In general, I've also done a reverb send on all of these tracks just to place them in the same space. And finally, the trumpet. These differences are a bit more subtle. Actually, what I did was I took each phrase and then I re-performed it, but this time I had a sense of what the arrangement was a bit more clearly in my head as I was performing it compared to when I came up with the first sketch. So I just put a lot more intention behind the performance. So let's just compare piece by piece. That's the original, and then in this later version. Bit of vibrato at the end, generally a bit more power, a bit more excitement. Let's have a listen to the next phrase. Just a lot more definition, a lot more clarity about what the intention is there. So again, just some more embellishments there. It's still very much the same material, but just trying to make tweaks that are in keeping with the overall spirit of the piece. So tip 4 is use pre-existing recipes and then tweak it from there. And so what do I mean by that? Well, when it comes to arranging and music in general, I think it's safe to say that there are certain patterns that exist that, as a listener, we've come to expect. So if you're writing a pop song, you know, a typical recipe might be to have some strummy guitar, some bass notes, some ostinato pattern, you know, a repeating pattern on the drums or percussion, and then maybe some kind of backing string pads or something more sustained like an organ. Having decided that's going to be my kind of meat and potatoes, what I want to do is then kind of spice it up a bit in the form of, you know, some counter lines on a violin or something a bit more unusual, some sort of modulated synth element in a particular moment that suits the lyrics. You know, there's lots of ways that you can then personalize it and make your own. But in that example, we're just starting off with a kind of template and then we're rolling with it from there. And then apart from the sort of instrumentation choices that are based in a kind of genre of music, I think there are also concepts and patterns that exist that are a bit more general as well. For example, the pattern of melody and harmony, or the pattern of a duet. You know, two kind of lead lines with a sort of rhythmic accompaniment. Things like call and response, where you have the melodies kind of broken up, or you have echoes. Another great trick that's often used in trailers is what's sometimes called a carrot song, which is where the arrangement essentially consists of a gradually increasing texture. So you start off with something very bump, 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 very small, and then you kind of get layer upon layer building up until you have this huge kind of rolling sound. Another pattern would be block chords, really chunky sound of like a top line melody but that's harmonized in block chords with a sort of rhythm section just ticking away underneath it. There are all of these kinds of shapes, and so don't be shy about taking some of these shapes and then just applying that concept, that arranging concept, to your own ideas. So in this next example, I've taken the idea of a melody plus a sustained pad of some kind, and then also this carrot track idea that I mentioned. So the structure is going to be a overall build, and then the other sort of technique or recipe is the idea of a sort of sudden stop or break. So those are the three elements, the three recipes that I've kind of taken from elsewhere and just applied to this track to create a certain kind of effect. Let's have a listen.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you.
You know, I think it works quite well. it's creating a different sort of flavour, this arrangement. You know, perhaps it's somebody's birthday and people have not realised and they feel a bit lonely, you know, and they're kind of trapped inside their own head. So before we move on to tip number 5, here's another example where I've taken some pre-existing recipes and applied them to this song. The song is going to be in a country instrumentation. The piece is in 3, so it's just going to have that kind of cha-cha classic 3 pattern that we're quite familiar hearing.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you.
And so what I like about this arrangement is it feels quite familiar, it feels quite warm, and quite sort of family oriented, so it fits well to me, the vibe of the song. I like the fact that the banjo doesn't come in until halfway through, so it creates a little bit more interest later on, it creates a sense of development. Also, the banjo has its own space in the mix. You can see it's panned slightly off to one side, and it's doing a sort of plucky thing, which acts as quite a nice counterpoint to the more solid and consistent and slower strumming pattern of the guitar and the sustains of the bass. And then finally, tip 5 is make use of contrast. Here I'm primarily talking about dynamic contrast, contrast between different instrument groups in your arrangement, you know, sonic contrast, contrast between different segments, things like that. As an example of what not to do for tip 5, let's have one more listen to our opening example.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you.
It's pretty intense pretty much all of the time. There is, as you probably spotted in the middle, a contrasting section. It goes into more sustained chords, and that definitely is a redeeming feature of the arrangement. But as you can see just by looking at it, they're all playing all of the time. I mean, it's sort of tolerable because it's quite short, but if this was going on for, you know, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, your ears would start to get pretty fatigued. So it's quite monodimensional. Let's have a listen to another example that I've prepared, which hopefully has a bit more of a dynamic range. It's quite a different vibe.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you.
There was a couple of different ways I was using contrast. One was, in my head, I was dividing up the instrumentation functionally into a group of kind of warmer instruments happening, and then a group of sort of cooler, more detailed instruments as well. And so here we've got the warm elements, which are some sustained string pads as well as an electric bass. That's kind of the main part of it. And then in addition, kind of in between each of these chords, we've got a sort of trilly thing provided by some solo strings and some woodwinds as well. So altogether it sounds like this.
Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you.
And then you have a little harp and celeste motif at the end following the melody. Also, another way that there's contrast is there's a definite feeling of growth. The peak comes around here.
Happy birthday.
It's actually quite a big dynamic change compared to the level that we started at.
Happy birthday to
And also the level that we finish at.
you.
You know, it comes right down in energy there. We're not just listening to a big wall of sound, but rather we're being taken on a journey, and the journey itself has some shape to it, some peaks and troughs. So thank you for joining me on this quick overview of the topic of arranging. I've really enjoyed sort of thinking up these points and coming up with examples, and I just would like to give another plug actually to this excellent book, which, you know, it's got a bit of an old school vibe. You know, it depends slightly on your taste. I'm personally a big fan of more vintage orchestration, you know, big band writing. It's quite a diverse book. In fact, the title, The Complete Arranger, alludes to this idea that it's a good thing for individuals to have quite a broad knowledge of lots of musical styles. There's a lot that you can learn from seeing how other genres work and seeing that some of these wider, higher level principles that we've been discussing apply sort of regardless to what area that you're working in. Thank you very much for your attention. Good luck with all of your arranging projects, and feel free to reach out in the comments. But in the meantime, I'll leave another video for you here in case you have a bit of spare time on your hands. But otherwise, see you on the next one, and thanks for watching.